Je déclare ouverte cette séance et bienvenue à la réunion numéro 26 du Comité de l'Agriculture et de
The meeting is open. This is our last meeting for the session before the summer adjournment, and I hope you had a great weekend in your ridings. I find that there are a lot of community events these days. It's great, and I thank you for all your collaboration, cooperation, and I would like to start with a few reminders. Today's meeting will take place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25th, 2001. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. Just so you're aware, the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. And of course, as you know, screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted.
Sure we're respecting the health and safety rules put forward by the Board of Internal Economy. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, May 30th, 2022, the committee is commencing its study of micro-cultivation of cannabis and cultivation of hemp. Of course, we're going to be hearing as this plays into the regulatory process that Health Canada is conducting 5 years after the legislation was introduced. And I'd like to now welcome our witnesses to the first panel. Joining us by video conference from the BC Craft Farmers Co-op, we have David Herford, who serves as the Secretary. Welcome. From Cannabis Council of Canada, George Smitherman, who is the President and Chief Executive Officer, and Jacqueline Menezee. I hope I'm getting that right. I did my best, but hopefully I nailed it. And from Sweetgrass Cannabis, Timothy Dighton, who serves as Director and Owner. So each of the organizations will have up to 5 minutes for opening remarks. I'm going to start with Mr. Herford from the BC Craft Farmers Co-op. Over to you for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the committee for the opportunity to speak to you on this important topic. The BC Craft Farmers Co-op was established 2 years ago to really help BC's legendary craft cannabis farmers transition to the legal market and maintain our province's global brand for cannabis excellence. We operate under the Cooperatives Act of BC and the tradition of thousands of other agriculture co-ops across Canada. Our BC cannabis farmers are truly a national asset. They are the best in the world at what they do, and they should be celebrated. But unfortunately, the federal government's micro-licensing regime is excluding thousands of them, not just in BC, but across Canada. In the first 3+ years of legalization, barely 80 of BC's craft farmers have completed Health Canada's microclass regulation maze. By comparison, there's 6,000 medical farmers in BC that are licensed with Health Canada. A cannabis policy reset is definitely required to realize the full potential of legalization in Canada and unleash BC's craft cannabis community. In April, our organization hosted a summit in Kelowna with the Association of Canadian Cannabis Retailers. Over 3 days, there's about 400 plus leaders in the sector came together to hash out some of the challenges that are created by the federal regime, among other things. And today I'm honored to present just a couple of the constructive policy proposals that were reviewed, voted on, and prioritized by delegates during the summit. There's 3 of them that I'll touch on quickly. First, the federal government should officially recognize across all legislation that cannabis is actually a legitimate and legal farm activity and product. Canada still does not define cannabis in this way, and the BC government's planning to exclude structures for use producing cannabis from the Agricultural Land Reserve. And this reality is keeping craft farmers from being eligible for most government assistance. Second, we need to help these craft farmers transition into this new legal regime and create thousands of rural jobs across Canada. 1,000 licensed farmers in BC have the potential to create 3,000 to 4,000 jobs and hundreds of millions of dollars in new revenue for taxpayers over the next 2 to 3 years. These farmers and processors should be able to access capital, grants, and small business loans that other agriculture sectors can access. We believe with the new Pacific Economic Development Agency, a craft cannabis partnership can be created with all the players involved to really grow the sector's capacity. And we think there should be economic development grants for Indigenous and local governments that want to expand craft cannabis. And finally, the Cannabis Act needs a reset. It is up for review this year, continues to rely heavily on the punitive and authoritarian approach that we saw during Prohibition. But this review does present an opportunity to reset, and we believe that an all-party House of Commons committee should be the one reviewing the Act instead of Health Canada, as oversight is required. And we also believe there are some small changes that the minister can make immediately to the Act without any disruption in advance of the review, particularly related to the micro-production caps, security pre-clearances, etc. If significant improvements are not made over the coming year and Health Canada continues to approve licenses at the current slow rate, Summit delegates resolved that jurisdiction should be transferred to an agency mandated to support the industry and help it flourish. We have submitted all these proposals to the various ministers of health, innovation, agriculture, and rural development. I'll just conclude, there's been a lot of speculation about why Canada's industry has not taken off since legalization 3 years ago, why the illicit market is still such a significant element. The reason is because cannabis legalization has deprived consumers of what they want. They want fresh, locally grown cannabis by farmers who respect the plant and are passionate about their craft. And Canada's legalization task force anticipated the risk of excluding these micro farmers. Otherwise, the task force predicted the development of unhealthy monopolies and large conglomerates, and that's what we're experiencing now in our industry. Our proposals are designed to be practical measures that can achieve win-win scenarios for consumers, small businesses, rural economies, agriculture industries, Canada's tourism sector as well. Working together, we can ensure that the legacy of cannabis legalization is not just that people are no longer arrested for possession of small amounts of cannabis. Instead, the legacy should be tens of thousands of Canadians are proudly employed and making an honest living for their families, doing something they love to do for the benefit of others. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Herford. Right on time. We'll now turn to Cannabis Council of Canada. Mr. Smitherman, perhaps, over to you for 5 minutes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Let me begin by saying what a privilege it is to appear before the committee today. And I would like to say that the Cannabis Council of Canada would be well aligned on significant portions of the previous witness testimony. And thank you for that. Please let me begin by saying that as an industry enjoys so many regulatory relations with Health Canada and CRA, we feel very at home amongst those who focus on Canada's growers. Cannabis and cannabinoids are a value-added agricultural crop contributing billions to a sector that is rapidly leveraging research and technology to create innovative products for millions of adult Canadian consumers. Through the leadership of the government and parliamentarians, including so many of you, our products are trusted globally, and we are quietly exporting millions in medicinal cannabis products to welcoming nations and patients. That global market, cannabis exports, is rapidly expanding and estimated to reach $100 billion US by 2030. At least 55 countries currently have or are considering purposeful cannabinoid regulations. Canada remains the most consequential global cannabinoid legalization initiative, but first mover advantages are proving perishable. Considering that there are more than 800 licenses issued under the Cannabis Act, Bill C-45, it's fair to say our license holders can be found in all of Canada's regions, and with more than 3,000 retail stores and a truly diverse ancillary services sector, our industry is everywhere, just like our consumers and our community. During our industry lobby day, we met with parliamentarians and we focused in on 5 key asks where we need to see change if the fuller potential of the goals of legalization are going to be achieved. I want to draw your attention to the threat of the very sustainability of many license holders of all sizes posed by unsustainably high taxes, fees, and markups that leaves almost nobody cash flow positive. Undercapitalized micros are the most vulnerable. Just as a quick reminder, sometimes referred to, especially by Health Canada, as LHs or license holders, they come in a various size of operations. Prior to the Cannabis Act, the medical cannabis regulations in place created a very high bar for facilities and operators, and were an important element that made the legalization of adult recreational cannabis possible following 2015. The regulatory model did not create avenues for historic or legacy producers to find their way into the new legal cannabis supply chain, and in response, the micro category was introduced. The trade-off was simple. In exchange for a very small footprint, micro cultivators or throughput microprocessors were born with watered-down regulations in areas ranging from internal and external security through to the requirements to have a quality assurance individual on staff. Previously, it was presumed that the legacy grower with a micro license would produce cannabis and sell it up the food chain to a larger scale licensed producer with brand and market reach. That marketplace, dominated by a few large players, has not emerged, and the numerous micros, including C3 members, Harvester, led by Ashley and Michael Athill, have fought for the direct sale to distributor models to the provincial boards. In response, Health Canada recently shifted approaches and proactively provided sales license status to all applicants, including micros, which implied an understanding that micros would be directly involved in sales to distributors, to the provincial boards. Here are some of the current challenges that micros are facing, even beyond the overall burden of taxes, fees, and distribution markups that fundamentally impairs our ability to compete with the unregulated market. The micro scale makes it difficult to generate enough revenue to support some of the services implied by a direct sales model. Our organization is on the record of favoring an increase in the footprint or processing volume of micros. Quality assurance stands out as an area where a coordinated plan to build capacity through shared services and best practices models should be developed with support from AAFC. Financial services access, and especially very expensive requirements for boutique recall insurance from the provincial distributors requires special attention. The smallest players in a nascent agricultural sector need nurturing support, and a cannabis lens should be applied to current programs to ensure fairness. For instance, a micro cultivator with an outdoor grow would not enjoy the same protection from weather-related risks as adjacent crops beyond cannabis, because cannabis is not on the list. And finally, Chair, achieving the objective of eliminating the illicit market includes the need for the integration of legacy growers into a sustainable environment that includes support for BIPOC communities that have historically borne the greatest price for cannabis legalization. Thank you for the time and appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Smitherman. We'll now turn to Sweetgrass Cannabis. Mr. Dighton, I think is how I would pronounce it. Over to you. Oh, we're having an issue with the sound. Madam Clerk,
sorry.
I don't hear. Oh, there we go.
Hi.
Over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. My name is Timothy Dayton. I'm representing the micro cultivators of BC and Canada, and just wanted to give a little bit of scope of what I've been through and some of the process. So I'm the director of Sweetgrass. I live in Weimar, British Columbia. Our town has about 450 people. My previous experience dealing with Industry Canada, I ran and operated a small aircraft charter with 5 airplanes and was doing from private charter to fire patrol for the government. So Sweetgrass Cannabis, we're a certified organic cultivation and processing company. We started in 2018. We started with 1 cultivation facility, and we have recently added a second. We have 15 employees, and from the beginning, we've been hiring local contractors and local employees trying to help benefit rural BC and our community. We produce dried flower, currently sold. We are selling in British Columbia and Manitoba, packaged in-house through Sweetgrass Cannabis. And then we also sell business to business to a company in Nova Scotia, which provides cannabis to all of Atlantic Canada. Right now, we've been also working with this company. We've been exporting to Australia as well. We've been working on a deal with Israel. So recently, we've also just completed our medical sales platform. So we've started working with the Veterans of Canada, as well as a variety of other medical patients. So I just wanted to touch in on a few of the issues and challenges that we've had as a micro cultivator. And one of them is, even though Health Canada has been really trying and really helpful as trying to work with us and establishing this new industry, they just do not have the experience or the knowledge of working with plants, and that's become an issue as far as moving forward in an agricultural sector. So excuse me. So one of the major issues that we had is we became one of the first micro cultivators to get a federal sales license. And this process took 11 months for us. So in that process, the 11 months, we were losing up to like $50,000 to $75,000 a month, waiting for Health Canada to be going through our application. And I think this is based on their lack of experience and knowledge in the agricultural sector. Another issue that we've had is the huge cost of actually becoming a micro cultivator. It's almost made it impossible for the legacy people to be transitioning to the what do we call it, the white market. Part of it is like the security requirements for our buildings are so grossly overpriced. There's more money in a winery. Like there's more money in product at a winery than there is at a micro cultivation facility. And the cost of us was $100,000 for us to do our two micro facilities. So that's a huge roadblock for all future micro cultivators. As well, what Health Canada has required is that the building has to be completed before we even apply. So that is just a deterrent that's impossible for the small grower to be moving forward and towards legalization. Another major roadblock for us as a small company moving forward is our marketing and our packaging requirements. Right now, if we sell business to business, the business that we're selling to is not even able to put our logo on the packaging. So for us to be developing our company and our brand moving forward as a small business, it's almost impossible to be recognized throughout Canada unless we had this federal sales license. So since we are one of the first, it's been beneficial, but we're only in BC and Manitoba compared to Atlantic Canada, where we'd like to be, growing as a company. So then as one other major issue that I'd like to bring up is the canopy size for a micro cultivator. The canopy size, we're restricted to a certain limit, but the production limits that they give us are not even achievable with the size of the canopy that we've been given. So we need to address this and allow us to be growing the proper canopy size for the proper amount of production. It's just not in alignment. So what I would like for Sweetgrass is just to have a reasonable business environment that allows us to help our rural community grow and flourish in Weimar, British Columbia, and throughout Canada. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dayton. And we'll turn to our question period now. So I'll start with the Conservatives for 6 minutes. Mr. Epp, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for your excellent testimony. I want to make a statement before I begin questioning, and given the experience of my local community and in other areas, please don't perceive the questions I'm asking as opposition to the 2015 legalization of marijuana. However, there's been a number of downsides for a number of communities, and this is, as has been mentioned here, particularly from the medical side. So that I want to make that statement up front. So to begin with, can I ask for a definition of what is a micro farm, micro license versus the medical? I understand the stacking and those issues, but could I have a definition? And I believe the last speaker was just referring to concerns around that.
Mr. Dayton, if you'd like to answer that.
Sorry. So yeah. So the difference between the micro cultivator and a medical cultivator is just the federal license. So the license is it allows you to sell medically. So there's no difference in the actual growing for medical or growing for recreational. It's just the actual sales of it. So we have a federal sales / medical license through Health Canada.
So there's there's no size restrictions as to your operation.
Yes, my size restriction is based on the canopy. So they base it on the canopy size of if you look down on, the plant canopy, a micro cultivation, we're limited to 200 square meters. So it's about 2,100 square feet of actual plant size. So the building can be bigger, but the plant canopy is limited to that size. So for expanding and growing, every time you want to have another facility, you'd have to go through the entire application process again.
Thank you. One of the issues on the medical side are Health Canada regulations around the conversion of a growing plant to prescriptions. Can you, and I recognize, being in agriculture myself, that it's going to vary from cultivar to cultivar, but what would be an average yield in grams from a plant of marijuana, or from a per square meter perspective?
I'd say, I don't know the square meter, I just know the square foot. So an average it is, because it depends on your style of growing, because you could either have large plants or small plants depending on, on your style of growing. But I'd say on an average, you would have per plant in the style that we're doing it would be about, ounces would be about 60 to 90 grams per plant. In a micro setting, growing for medical or recreational.
Thank you. So Health Canada actually uses 28 grams per plant, whereas OPP expert testimony uses 84 grams. Would you state for the record that the OPP estimate is probably closer to growing reality?
Yes, for an experienced quality grower, I think that would be more reasonable.
Thank you. One of the, one of the concerns is that from the legalization is that neither of the two stated objectives, basically the reduction of organized crime and the reduction of the black market, and we've heard testimony to that effect, have occurred. Locally, we've had some input suppliers testify to us that they were being paid in large sums of cash. So to advance the interest of the micro industry, would you consider, and I guess I'm going to ask all three representatives, that all payments in and out of the industry be actually tracked or used through a payment mechanism that's trackable?
I'm happy to answer that question, but also to offer, Mr. Chair, if it's appropriate, to Mr. Epp, that I believe some of your questions pertain to the personal grow model that Health Canada allows as a separate licensing regime for individuals who have paperwork from a medical practitioner. And we've taken issue that sometimes those medical practitioners are issuing notes which call for a very significant number of plants, well in excess of the number of plants that Mr. Dayton would be allowed to grow, I believe, within his limitation of footprint. So Mr. Dayton has spoken about a medical license from Health Canada within the Cannabis Act, but prior to that and continuing through, Health Canada also grants growers personal grow exemption. And some of the scale of these is very challenging to us in various parts of the country, and probably has been a focus of the OPP report, sir, that you've referenced. So I hope that intervention might be helpful to the committee.
Yes, thank you very, very much. And I believe it was the maximum prescription was 244 plants. And then if Health Canada uses a conversion rate of 28 grams versus a far more street accurate of 84, or as we've heard on testimony, 60 to 80, one can imagine how much excess cannabis is available for a market that is not legal. And that's exactly the kind of information that I'm trying to get on the record here. And so I'm going to ask, then I'll go back to Mr. Dayton, what kind of regulations would you like to see so that this industry is not tainted with the very same poor reputation that the other regulatory regimes have acquired?
You're on mute, Mr. Dayton, and you have 30 seconds after you get off mute before we have to move on to the next question. On Zoom, Mr. Dayton, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. The regulatory, I just like regulations relaxed for cultivation so we could move forward just the same as the wine industry as far as marketing and distribution along those lines, I think would be the biggest help for a small producer.
Thank you, Mr. Epp. Thank you, Mr. Dayton. We're going to now turn to, one other thing that I was reminded by the clerk. To our witnesses, if you're not speaking, if you could just mute yourself in between when you're being asked questions, that helps for interpretation and feedback. Mr. Weiler from British Columbia, you're going to have 6 minutes, and I'd also like to recognize that Mr. Morrissey is sitting in as well on the committee. So welcome to you both. Mr. Weiler, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It's a pleasure to be joining the committee today, and thank you to the witnesses for the excellent testimony already here. I want to start by asking a question to the BC Craft Farmers Cooperative. In terms of your policy proposals, you mentioned one of the big barriers was that the federal government doesn't recognize cannabis as legitimate farm activity, and so it's not eligible for assistance. And I was hoping you could explain to this committee how that could change and how that could be recognized as a legitimate farm activity and what the impact of that would be.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. And I think Mr. Smitherman touched on it a little bit as well in his presentation in terms of really looking at our lands across federal rules, particularly in the Agriculture Department, grant programs at Industry Canada, regional economic development agencies, to recognize what it really is. This is farming, and this is highly skilled farming, as Tim, I think, has pointed out. He's one of the best in the business, and we have thousands of them here. They regenerative farming in terms of giving back to the soil, different agriculture techniques that are in play. The land that we're growing on here in British Columbia is sacred land. Indigenous farmers have incredible techniques and a history of growing the plant for medicinal purposes. So we think it's really as simple as putting that lens across all of the federal programs and legislation that is there. We're suggesting provincial governments do it as well, and just really state the obvious. We had a lot of people who were surprised when this policy resolution came to the summit and said, you mean cannabis isn't realized as a farming activity now? Agritourism, in terms of cannabis as a place, especially craft farmers with farm gate sales. There's a lot of tourists that are very interested in agritourism, and cannabis fits very well into that box. So I think it's just a matter of looking at the federal programs and legislation that exists now, taking the stigma out of cannabis. It has been stigmatized for so long with the prohibition. It's very unfair to really start to look at cannabis in a different way, as an agriculture commodity, as a really cool agriculture commodity that's actually attracting a lot of young people into farming. We talk to a lot of agriculture producers in other sectors, and when they see our conference with a whole bunch of young people getting into agriculture, they really their eyes are opened that the cannabis industry and hemp can attract younger people into this business, because it is what it is. It's really farming.
Thank you for that. Maybe moving on here. One of the big challenges we've had over the last 5 years since legalization is the black market's still there. It still has a huge market share. And one of the challenges that have been raised already is just the low limits of microproduction, and that making it difficult for the business case to work for a lot of small producers. So maybe through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Herford, could you explain what the level of production that is allowed at microproduction levels is right now, and what you would see as a reasonable increase of that level, such that will make it more attractive and more feasible for a lot of the craft producers to get into the legal market?
Yeah, thank you for the question. The figure right now is arbitrary. It's, as Tim described, very small. It's about half a neutral zone of a hockey rink. Very difficult to make a profit. What we've suggested previously to the government is that it should be at least doubled to 4,200 square feet, which would be a full neutral zone of a hockey rink. Still very small, and from a municipal government's point of view, not that treacherous. The figure is arbitrary. Health Canada has told us they just picked this number essentially out of a hat. It's very unfair. we've suggested 4,200 square feet as a doubling, but frankly, it could go higher to 5,000, maybe even 10,000 square feet as well. We have a lot of standard producers who are in that field who identify much more with craft growers than they do with the larger. So that would be a good place to start. And this is a very easy thing for the minister to change. They could literally do it in an afternoon and with one stroke of the pen, dramatically increase the productivity and profitability of a number of farmers across the country without creating a lot of headaches for local governments and zoning, et cetera.
Thank you for that. Well, next question I'd like to ask to the Cannabis Council. One of the issues that you raised in your opening was just the challenges of taxes and fees and markups. And I was hoping you could maybe speak a little bit more to this and just particularly the impact of the excise tax on how that's actually been in practice much higher than it would perceive to be on the bottom line for a lot of the cannabis producers.
Mr. Chair, I'd like my colleague Jackie Menezes to answer that question. We had a recent EY report that she could refer to the committee, and also Mr. O'Weiler is her member of parliament, so it seems very, very fitting. Jackie?
Patrick, could you ask the question again? Sorry.
Absolutely. So I was just asking about the impact of the excise tax and on how in practice that it's actually been a much larger impact to the bottom line of cannabis producers than was originally foreseen by Health Canada.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Patrick. It has had a massive effect on people, on licensed producers, particularly because they now pay up to 40%, I believe, correct, George, of their on excise tax. It was supposed to be a 1-to-1 excise tax, and with the lowering of the price of cannabis at the retail sector, the excise tax has gone up. So licensed producers now see less of what is of their profits. They're shrinking, and this is having a devastating effect.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it at that. Thank you, Ms. Menendez. Thank you, Mr. Weiler. I gave a few extra seconds so we could get that on the record. But maintenant, Monsieur Parent, pour 6 minutes.
You have 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thank the witnesses for being with us. I would like to start with Mr. Dayton. You said that Health Canada doesn't have the knowledge or the experience to regulate this field, but it is a product that is used medically for therapeutic purposes. What I've seen in Quebec is that the distribution is not like it is in British Columbia. Here in Quebec, or rather in Quebec, it is regulated or controlled by the province. You did mention exemption for personal consumption for medical purposes. And in Quebec, there is a feeling that these permits are given out really quickly without any consideration for where the plants are going to be grown. Do you have any comments on that?
My sincere apologies. The translation was not working in my headset, so I'm not sure where the question went.
I'm
going to stop the clock just quickly for our witnesses, and my apologies if this wasn't clear. There is an ability to toggle between English and French, so perhaps that might not have been what happened in your case, Mr. Herford. But Mr. Smitherman, I'll turn to you.
Thank you. And thank you to the member for the question. With respect to the reference to BC and then the SQDC, one of the realities that we face is that the Canadian patchwork, as the provinces and territories have had their various approaches to distribution, has created a lot of very unique models and some very significant challenges also for licensed producers that are often shipping their products to multiple jurisdictions. The second point, I would have to say that we as an industry have echoed concerns raised by many provinces and territories with respect to what might be described as the porous nature of the personal grow. We have felt often that especially the number of plants involved was out of character with the good intentions of the program. So there are many, many comments and criticisms on the record related to that program. Health Canada did some modest tweaking last year, but we do think that there is area for more improvement in tightening that program to its perfect intentions. Thank you.
You said there could be some tightening, and Mr. Dayton, I hope you can now hear the interpretation. I was talking about the problems that municipalities had in Quebec, where in the middle of the city there is cannabis grown. I'm not saying that the plants should not be grown for personal use, but sometimes the fumes would be going in the neighborhood where there's a school, and some neighbors were unhappy. But the municipalities couldn't do anything because they were told that this person has a permit, and even the police couldn't do anything. I think there's definitely a problem. And I was wondering if you have the same problem, first of all, and second of all, in the small or in the micro culture. Well, you're in a sector where there is already agricultural production, so probably these problems don't exist. Am I right?
Well, actually, I think what a reasonable situation for that is what we do in our regional district is that they can have a smell aspect to the regional laws of what is allowable, and it's very easy to contain that as far as production of cannabis and maintaining the smells. And it's just they're just probably improperly ventilating and filtering the smells. And I think a solution would be through the regional district. I just also wanted to slide in what David said about the actual canopy size of what it should be expanded to. I think that whole thing should be scrapped and actually made it on a production limit. So it has nothing to do with how big of plants you are or anything. It's just what you actually produce. It would be much easier for everyone to be adhering to a certain production limit and being able to tax it. So that is a major thing that I think should change to just production limits. Thank you.
Merci. Un des objectifs, en tout cas sur la...
Thank you. One of the goals of the regulations of legalization was to eliminate the black market, and it doesn't seem to have worked really. There seems to be a lot of illegal transactions, and you have said that it was almost impossible for illegal producers to make the transition. What are the main obstacles? In 30 seconds, if you can, please.
The main obstacles are the cost of transitioning and the just the lack of support of helping these people transition to the legal market. Unless you have a vast experience of business, you can't just be a farmer and transition. And they've set it up in such a way that it is impossible for a farmer just to be a farmer. You have to be a full businessman and know policy as well, which makes it almost impossible.
Merci, Monsieur Dayton. Merci, Monsieur Perron.
Thank you, Mr. Dayton, Mr. Perron. Mr. McGregor, 6 minutes.
Mr. Chair, and again, thank you to all of our witnesses for joining us today. One of the reasons why I wanted to have this meeting at the Standing Committee on Agriculture is because, this committee really focuses on the challenges that farmers experience in the growing. It is a high-risk environment right across the field, and we certainly are very familiar with frustrations with Health Canada, not only from the committee membership, but also from many of the witnesses. Farming is a sector that runs into Health Canada regulations on a daily basis, and I think at this committee you'll find a much more sympathetic view to the challenges that you experience in the growing aspect. Mr. Herford, I'd like to start with you, and it's really to continue in your interaction with Mr. Weiler just on the programs that are available through Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. You've mentioned that in your letter to the minister that you wanted official recognition across all federal programs that cannabis is a legitimate farming activity, and you also wanted to see that craft cannabis farmers and processors have access to the capital, grants, and small business loans available to other agricultural sectors. So can you just clarify for the committee, when you look at like the business risk management suite of programs, the Federal Crown Corporation Farm Credit Canada, is it currently true that craft farmers don't have access to those like other agricultural activities do?
That's largely correct. It's really a patchwork across the country. There doesn't seem to be a lot of consistency to it, but generally the answer is no when our members go in. There's been some exceptions. Community Futures has done some good work in British Columbia as well. We're also looking, of course, at regional economic development agencies in addition to Agriculture Canada. We feel, for example, in British Columbia, we've just created a Pacific Economic Development Agency that's focused squarely on growth sectors of the economy. So we think it isn't just the agriculture programs, but I think you could pretty well go through the full suite of agriculture programs, and 9 times out of 10, you're going to see cannabis as ineligible, particularly the credit programs. Late stage applicants can't even get bank accounts this stage. Even license holders, it's amazing to me how their banks are charging them huge amounts of money if they're even able to get an account. And insurance is a whole different discussion. We have some farmers who are giving up their house insurance to be able to get the insurance for their small farm. All the cards are stacked against these farmers. The system appears to be built to fail. Even when Tim gets through the process, there's a whole bunch of challenges waiting for him. We haven't talked about CRA and other things like that. So it really is, these kind of grants, these kind of even economic development grants for municipalities, municipalities and Indigenous governments have been downloaded a significant amount of costs as well. There's no incentive really for municipalities to jump on board and say, yeah, we want a whole bunch of craft cannabis farmers here. It's just cost and work for them as well. So we think even in a case like Lytton, where the town needs to be rebuilt, there's incredible opportunities there to rebuild it around agriculture. And the agriculture we're talking about is cannabis. So I think 9 times out of 10, the answer to the question around existing agriculture programs applying to small farmers.
Sorry to interrupt, no. Mr. Hurd. Yeah, no, that's perfect. Like I just got a few other questions for some of our other witnesses, but we do want to get those points drilled down for our committee to recommend on. Mr. Dayton, I'd like to turn to you. You took the time to explain that Sweetgrass has gone through the trouble to become a certified organic company, so congrats on that. And I know for the craft industry as a whole, like whatever sector you're in, you look at craft breweries, they're often taking the time to tell a story about how their business came into being, the extra love and quality that they put into the product that they make, the extra steps that they go to make sure that their environment and growing practices are in harmony with the environment. But I'm assuming from what you told that the labeling requirements are so strict, your company is not able to really tell that story on the product that it sells. Can you expand a little bit more on that?
Yes, this is a huge issue that we're having, just is telling that story of like our growing practices. We're in live soil, we're using mountain water, the care that our team puts into it, and none of this is able to be shared even in a picture on the label. This is a big thing that needs to change. We've just been, we have a company video. It's a beautiful video, and we've been flagged recently on it because we are describing a day in the life of one of our employees, and because there was an animal in the video, we were flagged. And then there's other companies who are able to skirt the laws around it, and they're having not appropriate material on their videos, but because they are just a brand, they're able to do this. So yes, these are things that I'd like to do the same as the wine industry and be able to use local artists to do our packaging and tell the story. And everything you said there is so correct and is what is needed for the craft industry to actually be able to be appreciated and so forth. Yeah.
Thanks. And just quickly in the last 15 seconds, that's also on the certification, right? You're not allowed to tell whether you've been certified organically or if you're employing regenerative farming methods either, right? Just quickly on that.
No, that is not correct. We are able to say that we are certified organic, but that is an issue as well with Organic Canada's because we are not recognized as a organic product through the Canadian government. They're independent regulatory certifications.
Thank you, Mr. Dayton. Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Mr. Barlow for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I just want to pick up on the questions to Ms. Menzes, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I don't know if you had a chance to complete your answer, but I certainly appreciate when my Liberal colleague, Mr. Weiler, brings up the concerns with the excise tax, that a Liberal member is identifying this as a problem since we've been discussing this since the excise tax was increased. To Ms. Menzes, the excise tax is indexed to inflation. I'm curious, has your industry done any analysis? Obviously, this is impacting and impeding your industry's ability to grow as it already stands. But next year, when we see inflation at 6, 8, maybe 9%, and when this is set in the fall, have you done any analysis of what the excise tax could possibly be when you see it doubled, if not maybe tripled, from what you're used to?
We have recently done a study, thanks to Deloitte, and where we will look at the inflationary impacts. I'm going to throw it to George to see if there is any other further impact beyond what Deloitte mentioned.
Chair, two different studies have been out there in the cannabis space recently. Deloitte showing 45 billion in GDP contributed by the sector, and then more recently we put out an EY study, the first phase, which shows that the governmental collective appetite for taxes is coming in the 25 to 40% range, and cannabis was characterized first as sort of a tax of 10%, $1 in 10, but the floor has fallen out on the 10 and it's $3.50 or whatever, but the tax ratio has only grown as we've seen price de-escalation on a lot of our cannabis. Is really, especially the dry flower, become like a commodity. The commodity was projected at $10 a gram, with $1 of that as tax. We now have a commodity that's often $3.50 a gram, and the tax is still $1. So the proportionate aspect is out of control. The inflationary piece that you mentioned, Mr. Member of Parliament, I need to check on, because that inflationary aspect, I'm not sure it's applying to us in the same way that it is to beer and other excises, but I may be wrong. And so you'll forgive me for taking a moment to go back and get my facts straight and to send information along to all members of the committee related to the EY report, which focused in a lot on this overall tax bite, which is making it very difficult for people of all sizes.
Well, certainly I give you that opportunity to go back and find that out. And I don't want to make an assumption, but I would assume that you're being treated the same as wine and spirits and beer. So, as Ms. Menzies, you have a Liberal Member of Parliament. I would certainly go back to Mr. Wheeler and say your government needs to change their tact on the excise tax and listen to Conservatives on this issue. So it's a team effort here. It's a team effort. In showing that it's a team effort, I'm going to relinquish the rest of my time to Mr. McGregor.
Thank you. Chair, how much time do I have remaining? A minute and a half. Thank you, Mr. Barlow, for that. Mr. Herper, maybe I'll turn to you. We had a great submission from the Kootenay Cannabis Development Council, and in one of their sections, they were talking about the microbial limits that is placed on cannabis, the fact that the product needs to be irradiated to get rid of it. But often when small craft farmers are growing, especially with regenerative methods, that soil biology is so incredibly important to producing a top quality product. Can you maybe tell us about like those stringent requirements and how maybe they're just placing an added burden on the craft cannabis industry?
Absolutely, and I congratulate the Kootenay Council for their excellent work, and Tim may be able to give you a better technical answer on this, but I think the broader scope, particularly around the issues of microbials, is that the laws have really been brought in without a lot of engagement and consultation with the experts. This is a good example, I think, where we have made an Ottawa policy that really doesn't reflect what's going on and has some unintended consequences for the sector. So I hope this will be a key point as we review the Cannabis Act that we can delve into, because it really does prohibit a lot of the practices that we want to see, regenerative farming in traditional soils, and giving back to the earth instead of taking away from it. And we pioneer that in British Columbia. We're very proud of it. So I think that this is a one of those examples of where a lack of engagement and a lack of consultation with experts really has created some unintended consequences. But I might defer to Tim a little bit more on the details on that question.
We're at time, Mr. Herford. Thank you, Mr. McGregor. I'm going to turn to Mr. Drouin now for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and I want to thank the witnesses who took the time to appear before us, and thank my colleague, Mr. McGregor, for putting this motion forward. I think it's an issue that normally we wouldn't have discussed here at the Agricultural Committee, but there is a sense that cannabis obviously is a crop, and it should be treated as a crop. My question, and it's an open question to maybe to the council first, to Mr. Smitherman. Can you talk to me about the growth and the economics of the sector? Are you expecting, are analysts saying that there's going to be important growth over the next 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 5 years? And after that, what are the biggest impediments from government regulations that could impede that growth?
I would say that there is still a pattern of growth that's possible, but we're seriously at risk at stymieing that growth if we don't take means to address a combination of three things that lead up to a very, very entrenched illicit market still having a good go at things. We've got this tax issue, which I've put on the table, the combination of taxes and fees, and the provinces are big beneficiaries of these resources, of course, if we're forthright about it. But the burden of those collectively, as the EY report shows, is very challenging to sustain. Secondly, there's a lot of regulations which nobody is surprised by, but now we know that a lot of the assumptions behind the regulations are just plain wrong. And the statutory review looks like a very slow process to get the change that a lot of people need more immediately, if I could just put a circle around that. So what we really concerned about, Mr. Drouin, is that we would see a situation where we stop growing and we get locked into what we would think is approximately a 50-50 situation between the legacy markets and the regulated marketplace. Our argument, and this is the work that we're doing in the second stage of our study, will be to show all governments that if we take steps together, we can grow the pie and we can get more of the sales under a regulated framework, which provides certainty of a certain number of public health objectives and really important economic objectives for individuals, for communities, and for government. So we're a little concerned that the growth potential that's there as we bring on more of those legacy consumers is being stymied by a series of constraints, and that a few years hence, we might look back and say, wow, where did we go wrong? Why have we only gotten halfway there?
Yeah, I would add that I think those are good points. I would add that the restrictive microclass regulations are really the gift that keeps giving to the illicit market. What we're seeing is consumers are really voting with their feet. They don't have the product that they want in the store shelves. They don't have fresh, locally grown cannabis available in their local legal store. With only 80 farmers approved in BC in the first 4 years of legalization, it's almost impossible to find that product anywhere. So I think that as long as we continue to restrict access to the market to the expert farmers, and we're talking about thousands of BC farmers are needed to meet a local supply. Consumers want to buy local. to meet the national demand for BC bud and the growing global market for BC cannabis. Other countries are coming on board, and BC has an incredible reputation. As I said, this is an asset for our country, that we have the best cannabis farmers in the world here in BC and across Canada. There's great craft farmers across the country. So I think as long as the government continues to restrict access to these expert farmers, as long as they continue to deprive consumers of what they really want, fresh, locally grown cannabis, I fear that the current dynamic is just going to continue. And I fear that we're going to start losing these farmers. We're already seeing farmers who fought long and hard to get a micro license to just walk away from it, which is very sad. And there's thousands and thousands of jobs at stake in rural communities. We see rural communities suffering with layoffs in forestry and fisheries. Large producers are laying people off in rural communities. Here we have a whole network of expert farmers that are just waiting to join the market, give consumers what they want, and create.
Mr. Hufford, is that the impediment to growth and micro licensing? Is it because your operations such as yours or the ones that you know in BC, they want to grow and can't expand, or is it startups that are not able to access these licenses because there's too much either upfront costs to get going, or they submit an application and they don't hear back from Health Canada for months and months and months?
All of the above, and the stigma that still exists.
Mr. Herford, we're going to leave it just at that, because that's perfect timing. Monsieur Parent, 2 minutes 30 secondes, s'il vous plaît.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, listen, I'd like to come back to Mr. Dayton. When you say that Health Canada doesn't have the knowledge and the expertise to regulate, that the processing time is too long, it's not the only area where the processing times are too long. But what would efficient and effective regulation look like when it comes to medical cannabis, for example?
Well, the medical cannabis and the rec cannabis are all in one. You're just selling from the rec market to the medical market. So it's just making it available. So I think it's goes back to allowing quality craft product being available to the medical market and ways of easier licensing, faster licensing times, and just more support. Is just one of the key things I said is you're not even allowed to apply for a micro cultivation license until you have your building almost completely finished. There's no other industry in the world that would have that, and that deters every cultivator from even moving forward, because you're having to put up $1 million before you even know you can get a license, and that's just one of the major roadblocks for anyone moving forward. That's just a hard stop for a lot of people wanting to transition.
Well, basically, this means that big businesses have an advantage over small businesses that might have a niche project, and that has been well established. How do we promote this development without seeing the roadblocks that you listed earlier with the neighbouring areas, for example? You said that your regional and local regulations, in fact, trump the production permits. That doesn't seem to be the case in Quebec. Could we perhaps emulate the situation in BC? Is that a solution potentially?
I'm not quite understanding what your question is.
I can help there a little bit.
Okay,
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Herford, just 20 seconds if you could. Thank you.
Absolutely, and we are working very closely with the Quebec Association on exactly that, ways that we can share experiences and learn from each other. So I think there are definitely models that we can work off of together. And through innovation around issues like smell and odor, prohibition has really held back innovations in those areas. And we believe that there's lots of technology that can address some of those very legitimate concerns that municipalities have as well. So the answer to that question is yes.
Thank you, Mr. Herford. Thank you, Mr. Parent. Mr. McGregor, over to you to finish up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We know, on this whole issue of trying to get the legacy growers to come into the licit market, of course, this has been a story of challenges. And we know that, in many small towns in BC during tough times, cannabis sales are what kept many of those towns going. And so if we do want to have that success, I want to drill down on this issue of the constraints that currently exist with outdoor micro licenses. So I guess, Mr. Herford, like there have been proposals to not have it really based on a canopy size, but volume harvested. And there have been further proposals that, the licensing system should be graduated so that, first of all, a company can start maybe with the smallest one. If they can become quite successful and they see that the demand is outpacing what they're able to supply, they can graduate to a bigger license. Could you maybe just fill in the blanks for us and provide a little bit more detail on the specifics you'd like to see on those proposals, just so that our committee can make as accurate a recommendation as possible?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and I'll be brief. I don't disagree with what Tim said earlier in terms of the measurement, but given, how difficult it is to move Health Canada, they're stuck on square feet, so we felt it was just easier to kind of continue down that road. But I think that the Cannabis Act review should help that. We know it should be larger, and we know doubling the current size is very, very doable. The last thing I'd say is I'd really start with the medical farmers. We have 35,000 licensed medical farmers in this country that have been producing medical cannabis with some challenges along the way, as we've heard from, but we should start with them. These are people who are expert farmers, and none of them have really been approached in any systemic way to say, would you like to transition? The BC Centre for Disease Control tested the cannabis coming from these medical farmers and found that 15 to 20% of all of the cannabis that they're producing could pass the testing regime right now. So I would start in a systemic way with really looking at all of those medical farmers that are in the system. They've done their checks. The municipal government knows they're there. And to start looking at systemically transitioning them into the legal marketplace, recognizing that these are expert growers, and then working our way up from there, and then maybe providing a little more flexibility on the top end of the micro category for people to grow.
Thank you, Mr. Herford. Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Colleagues, that brings us to the end of our first panel. I'd like to thank the witnesses on your behalf for sharing your important testimony here today, so thank you. Colleagues, we're going to take just a 2-minute break. We do have a next panel, and the clerk is going to be sending, for those that are participating online, a virtual link, because for the last 10 minutes, we're going to reserve some time for some feedback based on elements you might want to see in the letter. We're not going to have a drafting stage, but it'll be instructive to our analysts. So for those that are participating online, watch for that link. We'll see you in 2 minutes and we'll get started.
Thank you.
Witnesses here, or at least scheduled, from Blue Sky Hemp Ventures, Devin Dubois, who serves as the Vice President, Corporate Affairs and Counsel. From Canadian Hemp Trade Alliance, Ken Haney, President and Chief Executive Officer, and we're going to work with Mr. Haney to see if we can get his microphone resolved. And we also have Keith Jones, who serves as the Board Chair. We did extend an invite to Agri-Food, but Ian Borosa has not showed up yet. So perhaps he will join at some point, but we've been unable to get him. So we have 5 minutes for opening statements. We're going to start with Mr. Dubois. Over to you for 5 minutes, my friend.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for hosting us today. My name is Devin Dubois. I am Vice President and one of the founders of Blue Sky Hemp Ventures. We are I would say, a primary hemp processor.
Okay, can you hear it now?
We make food products from seed, and we also make cannabis products from hemp flower and a licensed cannabis processing facility. So we are perhaps the only company that straddles the bridge between industrial hemp processing for food and also the cannabis market making extract. The important thing that we would like to highlight here today is that Canada's approach to regulating hemp must acknowledge that hemp is different from cannabis and that hemp presents a potentially higher economic value to Canada because of that difference. Hemp is a broad acre rotational oilseed akin to flax, sunflower, or canola, with the added benefits of supplying industrial and nutraceutical inputs, all in a sustainable, carbon negative fashion, making it potentially the highest value broad acre crop in Canada. It is not the same as cannabis grown for recreational or medicinal value. The other important element to understand is that the Canadian prairies are strangely well suited to hemp production, as land values and current production alternatives to hemp, other oil seeds in broadacre production, like canola, like flax, like sunflower, hemp is economically and agronomically competitive with those crops, given the right circumstance. We have an immediate advantage over other global regions, including the US, in terms of experience, production capacity, agronomic knowledge, production economics, and immediate processing capacity. However, this advantage will quickly dissolve unless Canada takes action to remove impediments to the growth of hemp cultivation. It's now a federally legalized production crop in the US, so we will see mounting pressure from the United States in terms of how they develop processing infrastructure and production. The other thing I'll leave in my introduction is the real reasons we need to think about fostering the growth of industrial hemp production. One of the first ones is that our growers are equipped and capable to simply add this crop in rotation in place of other oil seeds like canola and flax. This is really just another broadacre crop in rotation that has some unique attributes that potentially make it much higher value. Number two, when the industrial hemp stock is harvested and sequestered for industrial products, it pulls enormous volumes of CO2 in the vein of 2 to 6 tons per acre of production. This is real carbon sequestration. It's not a fictional or papered, I guess, accounting of carbon. This is a real carbon sink potentially if we can get that stock into industrial products. The other thing is that hemp is really the first potentially significant multi-use broadacre crop. That is, we can generate food and ingredients from seed, industrial products from stock, and nutraceutical compounds from flower, all from the same acre. And this is actually very possible, and this is really what our business is based on. And finally, growth in hemp production drives value-added processing, as the high volume and low value stock requires primary processing relatively close to production. It doesn't work in any other economic fashion. So where there is a large supply of hemp is where you will find value-added primary processing in all three sectors. Some of the things we'd like to raise today about the impediments to growth in hemp production. Number one, in order to be economically competitive with other crops, hemp must be a multi-purpose crop in the current situation. That is, we need to derive different value chains from both the seed, the stock, and potentially the flower as well. When growers are looking to place crops, they need revenue at a certain level, and that revenue has to be above $500 per acre, probably more like $600, $700 per acre to displace other crops. That said, for single purpose use, especially for single purpose fiber use, the fiber industry cannot afford to pay that. So this has to be a multi-purpose crop, and there's certainly opportunity to do that. Also, unlike every other oilseed or grain in Canada, hemp byproducts, including benign portions like seed, are not permitted for use in the commercial feed market. This is an extreme economic disadvantage for hemp growers and processors. Every other grain and oilseed industry has an outlet in the commercial feed market for byproducts and off-spec products. This may be the single biggest factor currently in impeding hemp production and hemp processing. And part of that is because hemp foods from seed generally remain in a niche market. So, you know, the market demand is growing, but it's taking time, and without an avenue to feed the byproducts into the animal market.
Mr. Dubois, if you could just wrap up in 10 or 15 seconds, sure, that'd be great. I gave a little bit extra, but over to you.
For sure. And the last thing is just to understand that although hemp crosses into the cannabis market, that's a very complicated transition, and we need our government partners to think about hemp as something different from cannabis so that we get the right regulatory regime in order to support the industry.
Thank you very much. I believe, Mr. Haney, we've resolved your microphone issues, fingers crossed, but over to you and Mr. Jones. You guys can decide how you'd like to split your 5 minutes. Over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the committee to hear from us today. Um, our organization has been involved as the Canadian national organization for the Canadian hemp industry. The Canadian Hemp Trade Alliance was established in 2003 to advance the industry, and we have over 240 members from all 10 provinces and one of the 2 territories from right across the country. And we represent over 240 members that span the entire value chain from producers right through to processors and companies that are making hemp products in the food industry. I'm involved with a hemp farm in Alberta and have been a board chair for the last 5 years, Canadian Hemp Trade Alliance. Since the passage of the Cannabis Act, Health Canada has unfortunately significantly harmed the Canadian hemp industry through inattention, neglect, and wholly inappropriate regulatory interpretation. This has directly contributed to the significant loss of hemp acreage in Canada from 118,000 acres in 2017 to 60,000 acres in 2021 and likely less this year. And Health Canada's regulatory oversight has significantly undermined Canada's leading global position as the global leader for hemp for food. Today, we are asking the committee to engage an emergency study on the current regulatory oversight of hemp under the Cannabis Act and the Industrial Hemp Regulation. And in the results of that study, we believe, will support our request to move the responsibility for the hemp file from Health Canada, who doesn't understand it, to Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, who does understand it. Our industry grew significantly from 1998 when production and processing of hemp was legalized in Canada right through to 2017. And then the Cannabis Act came in force in 2018. In 2017, our industry generated more than 180 million in sales, exported 97 million in value-added products, supported over 1,000 jobs, and provided 9 million in federal and provincial corporate taxes, contributing approximately $370 million to the Canadian economy. As Mr. Dubois testified, in addition to being an excellent source of plant oils and proteins, hemp is a tremendous contributor to carbon sequestration and low-emission agricultural production. And competitors in the US, Europe, Australia, China, and other countries are awakening to the potential of hemp and are amending their regulatory regimes to enable this important crop. The passing of the Cannabis Act and the Industrial Hemp Regulation was intended to consolidate all hemp-related regulation, delineate between hemp and high THC cannabis, streamline regulatory processes, and remove certain restrictions. Unfortunately, this hasn't been what's happened. Our industry has been damaged since Health Canada began regulating it under the new Cannabis Act. The entire industry is concerned about the regulatory implementation, less concerned about the Cannabis Act itself and the Industrial Hemp Regulation itself, although there are definitely opportunities for improvement. It's more the interpretation of those regulations and how Health Canada has actually regulated hemp. Despite hemp seed and hemp stocks being exempted from the Cannabis Act under Schedule 2, Health Canada has continued to regulate hemp and all hemp and provide advice to any people in industry interested in using hemp, as it is a controlled substance that requires a cannabis type of handling. So CHTA concurs with Mr. Dubois' testimony that it is time for a review of the regulatory environment and an amendment to the regulatory practices which are damaging the industry. I'll turn it over to Mr. Haney to share some specific examples. CHTA has a great deal of evidence to provide in this regard.
We have about 1 minute left for testimony.
Thank you very much. Hopefully my mic issues have been addressed. Just to summarize high points, there have been a number of areas that Health Canada's administration has caused damage, and they, at the high points, really are that the line between industrial hemp and THC has become less clear in many ways, and therefore has not been delineated. Particularly, Health Canada has created interpretation barriers that hinder or block value-added processing of hemp in Canada. And as a result of that, investment in food, feed, fiber, and fractions processing has been lower, and in some cases have moved outside Canada. The regulated processes guiding hemp breeding and cultivar registration have become more complex and less transparent, which represents a dual risk of less innovation and higher risk. Health Canada's regulatory interpretation regarding non-THC cannabinoids in hemp products is inconsistent with both the Cannabis Act and industrial hemp regulations. This has introduced risk and uncertainty, which in turn has reduced seeded acres and investments in value-added processing. The Health Canada's regulatory management
Mr.
has
Haney,
really led
I
to
apologize. We're going to have to keep it at that. I know my colleagues are itching to ask questions of our two different witnesses. We're going to get started just with that. I think Mr. Shields is sitting in. You have 6 minutes. Now, colleagues, just to be clear, we need to make a little bit of time at the end to provide some instructions to the analyst. My intention is the first round, so 6 minutes each party, and then 2 minutes for the Conservatives, 2 minutes for the Liberals, and then just 1 minute for the Bloc and NDP. That way we can get kind of 2 rounds. So, Mr. Shields, please, 6 minutes.
The witnesses, the information you presented today. I've been dealing with health ministers on this one for a number of years, and they all agree it should be transferred, but nothing happens. So recently I spoke to the industry minister, justice minister, and to the environment minister. They all thought it had been transferred. They can't believe it's still in health. So we have a challenge in the sense of getting it out of health, which it's got to get out of health. When you talk about the report, you referred to it, Mr. Jones, the report. Would you please submit that report to the committee immediately so we have it as part of it? You have excellent information in that report. I've reviewed it against this morning. You've also mentioned the international, but you also mentioned the decrease. Could you go back, in a sense, talk about why the decrease in acreage? This is a phenomenal crop. The witnesses have explained it tremendously in the value of it. But could you go back from your organization? Why has this decrease happened in crops, acreage? Mr. Jones?
Thank you very much, Mr. Shields. We've found that with the uncertainty around the interpretation of the regulation, farmers are finding it too risky to seed hemp and to plant hemp. CHTA has collected numerous examples of where food processors have approached Health Canada with regards to including hemp protein or hemp oil in their food formulations, and have been told by Health Canada that in order to do so and to comply with the requirements for CBD, the food processors need to register under the Cannabis Act as licensed processors. Well, they aren't intending to get into the cannabis business. They're planning to use the exempted parts of the plant, the hemp grain and the hemp stalk, for their processes, but Health Canada has advised them they've needed to get licenses to be a part of the Cannabis Act. Because of that risk, processors have shut down. Processors are not expanding their businesses. Other food companies are not looking at adding hemp protein, which is a fantastic protein, or hemp oil, which is a sensational functional oil, into their formulations. And as a result, we've seen our acreage drop in half and continue to drop.
Federal grant announced for Vegreville area to deal with the fiber and building other products with it. So this seems like hypocritical that we have a federal grant coming into a community to develop it, yet the health restrictions are lessening that. So this is where other countries are going, right? They figured this out, that there's fiber here, there's all sorts of plants, but yet we're going the wrong direction.
Yeah, that's a tremendous point. There is some significant interest in hemp fiber, and because hemp fiber is part of hemp straw, which is exempted from the Act. The processors have moved with more confidence on hemp fiber because it's not connected to a food product. And Ted, you had a comment?
Yeah, the approach, dual approach of Health Canada, which was to implement a completely unjustified interpretation of zero tolerance for any non-THC cannabinoid in any hemp processed product, really put an end to hemp entering the natural health products and veterinary health products sector completely, and has absolutely put additional risk in the highly value-added processes or programs in hemp fiber, as well as hemp foods from seed and stock. Because Health Canada has basically treated the whole plant as cannabis, the ability to use hemp roots to extract bioactives and or to infuse the product for even topical lotions has been completely voided. So we have a major issue with Health Canada treating hemp as cannabis, which is the opposite of what the intention of the Cannabis Act and industrial hemp regulations were in the first place.
This trading partner of the U.S. years ago at a Penwar convention. Americans were there asking questions about Canadian hemp industry. There was little interest at that time. But since then, it has exploded in the States, the interest in hemp. We are now falling behind, and the reverse of 5 years ago was the place. They're our biggest trading partner. How are we going to compete with the U.S. in our hemp industry if this continues?
I think it begins with implementing the Cannabis Act and industrial hemp regulations as they are written, and more importantly, as Parliament intended them to be implemented. That will be a great start. There are amendments to both that will be helpful to more fully open our industry while protecting human health and the environment. But just implementing those two documents as intended will be of great assistance.
Mr. Dubois, I'm about out of time.
15 seconds, so if you would serve that back. Oh, sorry, 15 seconds. Over to you.
No, I would just echo what's been said and have everyone understand that the market is here for the taking. We export much of our product, our non-cannabinoid product, our food product ingredients goes to the U.S. We're currently a net exporter, but that could change if we're not careful.
Thank you. Mr. Turnbull, over to you for 6 minutes.
Well, thank you. It's great to have such knowledgeable witnesses with us today. Thanks to all of you for your testimony. I found it really interesting and informative. But let me just zero in on a couple of questions I had. In the opening remarks, it was mentioned that hemp has such a great economic potential because it's a multi-use crop. And it sounds like that potential is being under realized at the moment. What would be the economic potential that you see in the future? Like, if this industry grew to its full potential, do you have any sense of what size it would be? Maybe I'll frame that to Mr. Jones and Mr. Haney for now.
Sure. Our industry has, assuming the Cannabis Act and industrial hemp regulations are appropriately implemented, have believed that we will move from our current 60,000 acres to 229,000 acres with farm gate sales of $340 million, $1 billion of industry sales, $500 million in exports, almost 5,000 jobs, and contributing $2 billion to the Canadian economy. So that's the prize for our industry, for Canadian agriculture, and the Canadian economy, just by implementing the Cannabis Act and industrial hemp regulations as written and as intended by Parliament.
Thank you very much. And I'll go to another question related to the real carbon sequestration. I found that really interesting just in terms of the potential of hemp production sequestering more carbon. How does that compare to a comparable crop? You mentioned flaxseed, for example. I'm not sure if that would be the most comparable one, but do you have any sort of a comparator that you could give us in terms of understanding the potential for carbon sequestration? Maybe to Mr. Jones?
Certainly. Actually, the Canadian Hemp Trade Alliance has established a sustainability subcommittee that is actually doing detailed life cycle analysis, life cycle assessment to provide the specific data and evidence in this regard. The reason that hemp is so attractive from a sequestration potential is because of its nature as a multi-use crop, and in particular, the utilization of fiber in materials such as building materials, construction materials, environmental enhancement products such as environmental remediation mats, non-woven mats, etc. The hemp plant itself does a great job of pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, but the uses of hemp tie up that carbon that's in the stock for many, many, many years. And I'm not sure if the other two witnesses would care to add to that.
No, it's just that point. The distinction between this crop and others is not only that this is a fast-growing crop and a large plant, which just generates a large quantity of biomass. The distinction is that we're retaining that biomass, like Mr. Jones said, in industrial products. Right now, if you're talking about, sorry. Yep.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm just going to try and squeeze one more question in. In terms of, I understand from the testimony given so far that it seems that certainly the industrial hemp regulations could be improved, but in fact it seems to be that it's the interpretation of those regulations which has kind of gone awry. And is that, in your opinion, a result of Health Canada not completely understanding the business of agriculture, which I'm sure happens from time to time?
A simple answer, yes.
Great, thank you. And can you pinpoint what interpretations of regulations that you want to see changed? You've already mentioned some of those, but I'll give you an opportunity as an open question to identify any others that you haven't had the opportunity to mention yet.
Sure. We will be submitting a more extensive document following our testimony, but a number of things that, number one, confirm that the only hemp processing activity requiring Cannabis Act licensing and controls is the extraction of concentrated or isolated cannabinoids from hemp chaff or hemp extraction biomass. Confirm that the only regulatory maximum concentration for cannabinoids within the definition of hemp or processed hemp are 0.3% THC in the flowering head of the leaves of the hemp plant and 10 parts per million of THC in hemp foods. There are no other maximum concentrations for the low-risk, non-intoxicating, non-addicting, non-THC cannabinoids. We need to confirm that processing, import, export, and wholesale sale of hemp products are processed hemp products are not subject to Cannabis Act regulation or control, even if extraction technologies are used. And this is an example where Health Canada hears extraction and they think extraction of isolated cannabinoids from flowers. But we extract purified cellulose from stalks. We extract individual fatty acids and amino acids from seed. We extract bioactives from birds.
I'm sorry to cut you off, sir. Unfortunately, your time has run out. Thank you, Mr. Turnbull. And now the floor is yours, Mr. Perron, for 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Thanks to the witnesses for being here today. There seems to have been a technical problem with Mr. Bourassa from Agri-Food, so if he can't be called back to another meeting in the future, I'd ask him to send in his brief by in writing, please. So thanks to the witnesses for being here with us. I'm very interested in what Mr. Dubois had to say earlier and Mr. Haney about carbon sequestering. You touched on this issue with Mr. Turnbull. What is the performance of hemp compared to other plants when it comes to carbon sequestration?
So I'll take a first try at this, and Mr. Jones or Haney can follow up. The distinction is that hemp will sequester when it's growing or pull as much or more carbon in most circumstances. It depends on geography, variety, agronomic practices. It will use and pull more carbon than pretty much any other broadacre field crop grown in Western Canada currently. I'm not sure that that's necessarily true when it comes to comparing soy and corn, but the true distinction is that none of those other crops, the bulk of the biomass just disappears. It's part of the harvesting process. That biomass is processed out the back of the combine. It goes back onto the field and it's tilled, or it's just left and it decomposes. The distinction here is that about, somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 to 85% of that biomass on the hemp plant is being taken and sequestered. It's going into food products for seed, but the bulk of it then goes into industrial products like building materials, like hempcrete, like synthetic board. It goes into those non-woven applications like Mr. Jones talked about. The huge distinction, and this is no small thing, is that we are actually removing that huge volume of high carbon biomass from the field and putting it into durable products that last decades in many cases. So that's the huge distinction.
In addition to that, the hemp root is a very significant structure, including the taproot and branch roots, that also sequesters carbon in soil at a higher rate than other crops that don't have such an extensive root structure. And again, harvesting for fiber results in long-term sequestration through industrial use.
Finally, I'd add that from a plant perspective itself, as a farmer, you get a biomass yield, a tonnage biomass yield, because the hemp plant can grow to 3 to 4 meters tall for hemp applications in fiber. So the sheer biomass yield is sequestering far more carbon than a flax plant or a wheat crop or a pea crop would.
Thank you very much for that collective and very complete response from the three of you. I appreciate the detail. Mr. Haney, if I've understood correctly, hemp can be used in rotating crops and can be effective when it comes to soil richness. Is that the case?
Absolutely. We have done work, and over the next 5 years plan to do additional agronomy research to understand more detail about hemp in rotation. But because hemp is genetically very unique from other crop types in Canada, it has the ability to break pest cycles, it has the ability to break weed cycles, and because of its inherent structure, including the remaining stalk after harvest and the root structure, it does have the ability to contribute to soil health, reduce compaction, and increase soil moisture and nutrient holding capacity. That in turn leads to cleaner groundwater and less nutrient leaching. So yes, hemp has a very significant ability to contribute to soil health and environmental health in a mixed rotation environment.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Haney. Je poursuivais avec...
Thank you very much. Let's now turn to the regulations. If I understood you correctly, the current problem isn't the regulations themselves, but they're being poorly or misinterpreted, and that Health Canada considers hemp to be just like cannabis. So the regulations don't need to be changed per se. They just need to be properly enforced and interpreted properly, and that there'd be a transfer of jurisdiction from Health Canada to Agriculture Canada.
We do have 10 recommendations for to guide interpretation within the current Cannabis Act and industrial hemp regulations, but we also have 10 additional recommendations for amendments of the Cannabis Act and industrial hemp regulations, primarily to clarify the issues that are currently misinterpreted.
Monsieur Perron,
Merci beaucoup.
c'est temps. Merci
Oui.
beaucoup. Maintenant, Monsieur McGregor pour 6 minutes.
Mr. McGregor, you have 6 minutes.
Very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. I'm really glad, actually, that we've got you before the Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food, because I think, as you can see from the nature of the questions, you've got a little bit more of a sympathetic ear here. We're very used to hearing the perspective of growers, of producers, and the challenges that they face. I wanted to just, you've already informed us a lot about the incredible environmental potential that exists, like the carbon sequestration and so on. But I just want to go a little bit further, because I understand hemp is quite a hardy plant. It was already said that it's very useful in breaking pest cycles. But can you tell us a little bit about, compared to other crops, like what are its input requirements? Is it pretty good at trying to manage the nutrients that it needs? Are there many pests in Canada that do affect it? Just if you can inform the committee a little bit more on that.
The plant itself is a very efficient plant, and we don't have a significant load of either pest or disease pressure on hemp at this point. We do have some, including, for example, sclerotinia, or which affects many other crops. But some of the major diseases that affect other crops simply aren't present in hemp, primarily because it's genetically very, very unique and different. So we do continue to seek additional minor use registration of crop protection products, both biological and manufactured, to address those primarily disease pressure issues that are present. But overall, it is a plant that is very efficient. It does have high nitrogen needs because it grows significant levels of biomass. But that said, it utilizes that efficiently.
My riding is on Vancouver Island, so of course, historically our main industry has been in forestry, but our forestry industry has suffered over years, and of course, we have pulp and paper plants which have a very symbiotic relationship with our sawmills. The sawmills provide the fiber feedstock that's necessary for pulp and paper to really thrive. But in recent years, we've had some of our sawmills shut down, and that supply of fiber has been endangered. You've talked about how your growers really are right across Canada, and I'm just wondering, like in the fiber market, if you look at like forestry-dependent communities, and maybe some of the new and innovative opportunities that exist for hemp growers to fill in a niche market, but also exist symbiotically with traditional forestry. Can you just talk about some of the opportunities that exist in communities like mine out in British Columbia?
Sure. In our last round of Canadian hemp strategy workshops, players from Vancouver Island indicated that they would like to be able to enter the hemp production cycle on Crown lands that are currently under forestry permit as a cover crop directly after harvest, to be able to contribute back to soil health and to provide a short-term revenue stream prior to replanting and moving back into tree production. So that would be an example of how the two can work together. And again, hemp does provide a great cover crop opportunity in all soil classes, including those in particularly northern Vancouver Island, that are under long-term forestry.
That's really exciting to hear, and I'd like to learn a little bit more about that. And finally, I think we've established that the management needs to transition away from Health Canada. We've heard mention of Industry Canada, but of course, our committee's main mandate is to look after agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. Is there anything that you've missed talking about today that you would like our committee to specifically focus on with respect to agriculture and Agri-Food Canada?
There's certainly one that comes to mind for me, which is inclusion of all hemp products, but hemp byproducts, and especially benign products like seed and its byproducts in the commercial feed market. This is a CFIA impediment currently. It's CFIA regulations, so this is not a cannabis issue so much as it is those feed regulations. Suggestion coming from us as a processor is perhaps your committee and the CFIA could consider offering sort of an immediate exemption for seed and seed byproducts at a minimum, or maybe even including stock byproducts, things that we know are benign and they're currently in the human food market until we do what's ever required in order to finish that CFIA inclusion. But this is an extreme impediment to the legitimate industry right now, and an extreme impediment to having more seed processors, which gives rise to the possibility for fiber processing. Without someone to take seed, there's no economic case for anyone to grow this for fiber. So we need that opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Dubois. Thank you, Mr. McGregor. So colleagues, just 2 minutes, Mr. Barlow, if we could keep it tight, and then we'll go 2 minutes, 1 minute, 1 minute. Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll be very quick. I just have two questions, and I'll ask them both at the same time and leave them open for responses. I think our committee did a great job hitting on the main issues. My two questions are, what is the reasoning, or has Health Canada given you any responses from your communications on why they are not willing to relinquish hemp from their jurisdiction into Agriculture Canada? My second question is, what is the percentage of CBD or THC in hemp compared to regular cannabis? And what is the technology, I guess it's three questions, sorry. What is the technology in terms of gene editing hemp to remove the THC, CBD completely? And maybe that's a bit of a help with Health Canada.
To answer the first question, there have been no detailed or reasonable feedback on it. We do hear machinery of government is difficult to amend, and so that's just a way of telling you that there's a high wall, so don't bother looking at it. But particularly all producer-facing activities, licensing of producers and processors, permitting export and import, data collection, notifications of cultivation, and data reporting, that all most definitely should move to Agriculture Canada, that has a culture and resources to be able to work with farmers, with producers and ag processors within a agriculture industry, which is what we are. With respect to cannabinoid content, we're limited on all foods at 10 parts per million THC. All of our food products, our seed-based food products, are less than that. All products from stalks are far less than that, and there are no cannabinoids whatsoever in roots. Yet, Health Canada still tries to interpret regulations as if they are high THC, and with respect to the non-THC cannabinoids, none of them are intoxicating, none of them are habituating, none of them are addicting, and they've been studied extensively by the UN Expert Commission on Drug Dependence, and they're well tolerated, don't represent a risk to human health.
Thank you, Mr. Haney. We'll have to leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Barlow. Ms. Valdez for 2 minutes.
Thank you to the witnesses for joining us today. For any of the witnesses, if anyone can submit to this committee any reports or detailed numbers about carbon sequestration, it would be really very much appreciated. So a quick question to Mr. Dubois. In your opening remarks, you mentioned how Canada is competing with the US in this space. What would be the lost opportunities for Canada if we do not remove the impediments to this industry?
Well, the biggest thing to understand, again, is that the industrial products stream, where the stock material coming off the field is a very high volume and currently relatively low value, there's no economic case for shipping this any particular distance. So the value-added processing, needs to occur close to the source of production, and the source of production right now is really governed by the ability to use and market seed and seed byproducts. So that's what the U.S. has in their hands now. Growers everywhere, federally, now are able to produce seed, industrial hemp seed in large volumes. And our concern is that capital is mobilizing to both address seed processing markets and the accompanying fiber markets in the U.S. So we need to scale up our ability, and we need to pave the way for easy production and access and processing and exporting of seed and seed byproducts in order to foster all of that value-added processing chain here close to home. That's the competition. If the large-scale seed processing takes hold, on the south side of the 49th parallel, then the fiber processing will go there too, and we'll be competing with a behemoth to our south.
In 2017, Canada was 4 times larger than the US in seeded acres. Today, the US is slightly ahead of Canada in seeded acres in hemp.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Thank you, Ms. Valdez. Monsieur Patron, 1 minute, donc.
Mr. Perron, you have 1 minute. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for all witnesses. You've made 2 main recommendations. First of all, that hemp be regulated by Agriculture Canada, and that the regulation be well interpreted. You've also said that there should be some changes to the regulations. What should be our priority? I think the number 1 priority should be to move all
regulatory activities to Agriculture Canada. And secondly is to seek appropriate interpretation of the Cannabis Act and interpret it and industrial hemp regulations, so as to be consistent with the Act, the regulations, and the will of Parliament, which we do not believe are being respected at this time. And that, I think, will require a special study.
Thank you very much, Mr. Haney. Thank you very much, Mr. Perron. Colleagues, that brings us to the end of the second panel. As was already mentioned, for those, I think it's just Ms. Valdez and perhaps a couple others that are online, but if you could transition quickly over to the channel, the off-camera, the in-camera, I should say, portion. We're going to provide some feedback to our analysts, but to our witnesses, thank you very much for being here today. Colleagues, bear with us. We'll just have a little bit of a feedback period. And the other thing I would like to say is just simply thank you to our translators on the record for all their work, especially as we break here until we're back in September. But colleagues, just switch over and then we'll provide some feedback to the analysts.
Thank you.